Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Panholtz here, back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all's going well on the other side of the Internet. Man, I got on the other end of the Internet a longtime friend going back a number of years, Bill D'Alessandro with Elements Brands or Element Brands?
Elements Brands, both plural. Good to be here, man.
Yeah, man. Good to have you. Long time no talk. He popped out a kid right when I popped out a kid. How's that going?
Yeah, they're the same age, about 9 months old, I think. So yeah, it's going great. It's my first one. So his life is good. And it's also been, working from home now with the pandemic and everything. I've gotten to spend a ton of time with him, which has been awesome.
I don't know, man. How do you juggle familyhood and building a business and all that? Is that going well?
Well, I'm lucky to have an angel wife who takes care of him most of the day while I make money on the internet. But it's kind of funny, when he's old enough to understand, I'll tell Joey that he was part of the family business before he was even born. When she was 8.5 months pregnant with Joey, I had her film an ad for one of our maternity brands in our bathroom mirror. And it's turned into one of those kind of 7-figure ads that really scales. So I told Joey he's made $1 million before he was even born. So it's integrated work life.
You got a good return on investment for that pregnancy, man.
That's right. So yeah, it's been going well. It's nice to be home with him.
Well, why don't we get started for all of our listeners who aren't familiar with Bill, which should be pretty crazy because you also, as you say, shoot the shit with Andrew Udarian over on E-Commerce Live a bunch.
Yeah, E-Commerce Fuel podcast very regularly.
Tell us about your business. What are you building?
Yeah, sure. So my business is called Elements Brands, both plural, and we've been around since 2010. We are an acquirer of direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands. And what that means is we buy e-com brands and centralize them onto our platform. So we have about 60 people. We have 51,000 square feet of office and warehouse space here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we'll buy a brand and we'll consolidate all the shipping and even some manufacturing here in Charlotte. We have dedicated brand teams that run each brand. We don't use a lot of agencies. We do almost everything in-house, everything from Facebook ads to SEO, web design, all that stuff. And then we have a dedicated supply chain group that works with all of our manufacturers. So we basically find entrepreneurs who have built something cool, but are ready to move on to the next step and provide a great home for their brand. So we write them a check, they can move on to the next thing, and then we help the brand to grow after that. So we really aim to be a good long-term home for brands that people have built.
It's really cool hearing that because when we first met, that was not your pitch. That's not what you were saying your business was.
What was I saying then?
I don't know. I think you only had one brand at the time.
That's true. I guess I forget how long we go back. Yes, I had one brand. It was more kind of 4-hour work week style.
Yeah, that was like the Green Machine or...
It was a skincare topical brand called KP Elements, which we actually still own today. And that was, 7+ years ago when you and I met. So since then, we've gotten very good at e-commerce and realized that we've built something that scales and we have all the systems and process, and we've since raised outside capital and are really able to aggregate these brands. We had 8 brands in the portfolio. We sold our 3 smallest this year. So we're down to 5 brands and have just raised a fresh new round of capital. And so are out there looking to do more acquisitions next year.
So what are you looking for in brands in terms of what you're trying to buy? What makes for a good acquisition and what are the ones that you're turning away from?
Yeah. So people ask me this a lot, and I always feel like I have to caveat it at the beginning by saying, this is my criteria for what we focus on. If you're listening, your business does not fit this criteria, it doesn't mean you have a bad business. And it doesn't mean that someone else won't buy your business. It just is that we can't do everything, and this is what we do. So what we look for at Elements Brands are branded consumable products. So something that you buy once and buy again and again and again. We look for businesses with kind of north of 3 to 4 million in sales would be sort of the smallest we would go. And we love brands that have at least 50% of their revenue on their direct consumer channel. So Shopify or, WooCommerce or whatever you use to run your site. There's a bunch of guys out there that buy 100% Amazon brands. And Eric, I know you have your own feelings on Amazon, but we're not one of those guys. We really like to see the brands that have built a direct connection to their customer. Like, for example, we own brands in the pet space, pet supplements and pet topicals, any kind of lotions, potions, creams, things like that. We own a laundry detergent brand. Those are the types of things that we really like.
So I've got a funny story to tell you, Bill. We didn't talk about this before recording, but about a week ago, I got an email from a Trevor Glenn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, asking me if I was interested in selling Beard Brand to a consumer holding-based company in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I said, if that's Bill, tell him he ain't rich enough for us yet.
I'm sure I'm not. Yeah, we've been doing some outreach, and maybe you came up on one of our screens.
That's pretty cool. So it sounds like you've got a little bit of help to discover these brands and find them, and talk about how you've built your team and what that looks like.
Yeah, so we are about 60 people now. We have, as I kind of said at the top, dedicated marketing, dedicated supply chain, dedicated logistics, dedicated finance and HR, and a deal guy that does outreach. So, that was a lot of growth from just me, right? Whenever you're an entrepreneur, you're at the beginning, you're doing everything. And so what I basically started, kind of my hiring heuristic has been, draw a pie chart of my time and identify the largest wedges, and then ask myself, is this where I am the best in the world? Like, is this a good use of my time? A good friend of mine, and maybe you know him too, Craig Gentry from Got Fresh Breath, he gave a talk at Ecommerce Fuel Live, and he basically said, kind of, what is your water? If you're Aquaman, you don't go picking fights on land, you go picking fights in the water. And that really resonated with me. Where do you have unfair advantages? Where are you better than other people? And if you're not spending your time in that area, you're essentially misallocating your time. So for me, what I'm really good at is acquisitions. I'm good at doing deals, and I'm also good at digital marketing. And so if I'm not spending my time in those areas, there are probably other people whose water is these other areas: logistics, shipping, right? All these types of things, accounting and finance. So what I look at is I say, if my pie chart of my time, one of those big wedges is something that's not my water, I need to go out and hire somebody whose water that is to free me up to spend more time in my water. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Really good insights in there, and always get me thinking about, man, what the hell am I doing in my life? What kind of things should I be doing? But it's a good reminder, I think, for all entrepreneurs. We always get into that trap of putting out fires or doing this or that to move the company forward. But if you do that long enough, you're really not going to be moving the company forward at all. When do you think you kind of hit a inflection point in your business where it kind of found new waves? Kind of talk about like busting through some of those earlier plateaus to grow the business to get to 8 brands.
One of the plateaus was definitely for me moving from kind of doer to manager, from sort of founder to CEO. I think that's a leap that a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, struggle with, because, we started these businesses to be founder, right? And the skill set of CEO is a lot different. And one of the big leaps for me was described by a mentor of mine is you've got to move from managing by knowing to managing by reporting. And when we're small, and I think, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, and Eric, maybe you sympathize too, you can kind of know what everybody's working on when you have a small team. You kind of know what the priorities are. Like, everybody kind of knows what the priorities are. You're a small team. You're kind of working hip to hip. You don't need to do a bunch of reporting because everybody's just on the same page because you're a small team. But ultimately, you can't. That just doesn't scale. Like, if you have more than kind of 5 or 6 direct reports, none of them are going to be getting enough of your time. And also, you're going to be kind of a little bit too schizophrenic. You're getting too many inputs. You can't manage more than 5 or 6 people well. So you've got to move from management by knowing to management by reporting, which means you've got to set up structures where, you get a piece of paper every week, and that'll have some metrics on it, or some qualitative discussion on it about, how part of the business is going. And that should be enough that if you were on a desert island, you got that report and that everything's good or that everything is bad and you need to get involved. And that was really hard because you've got to boil down, what are the scorecard things that really matter? Do I really need to know this, or is this just a vanity metric? Or there's not really a metric for this, but like, how do I quantify, whether we're having too much turnover in the warehouse? Or how do I quantify, whether our strategic plans are on track? So kind of that leap from management by knowing to management by reporting was a big one for us. Have you experienced that at Beard Brand at all?
Yeah, I mean, man, this year's been great for us. I'm not a accountability kind of guy. at all. I'm like purely an ideas, creative, mission, voice of the brand kind of guy. So like my energy, my pie is the more I can spend that time kind of being the face of the brand and kind of sharing my creative inputs, the more value the company will be. So I need to really lean on the team for execution and, accountability and KPIs and stuff like that. So my business partner, she's done a really good job being that person, kind of more of the integrator of the role. Do you guys follow that visionary integrator concept by Rocket Fuel?
Yeah, so we do run on EOS, and I have a phenomenal COO who would be my integrator. We do it a little different in that we kind of have divided the world up, and I am kind of over sales and marketing. Even though I hired him, I really kind of treat him as a business partner and co-founder and gave him some equity in the company. So kind of our deal is everything operations, finance, shipping, fulfillment, supply chain, HR, all that all rolls up to him. He makes all those trains run on time, and I just talk to him about it. And then everything in the marketing and sales side of it, that all rolls up to me because that's my water. And so he and I kind of run the business together as a two-headed beast. But I've recently hired a director of marketing underneath me to kind of be more that marketing integrator so I can be a little bit more visionary.
Yeah, I kind of feel we're built the same way. Like technically the marketing side goes up to me, creative goes up to me, but I'm very hands off with the marketing. I'm not looking in the ads. I'm not in the weeds at all. Like I couldn't even tell you what ads we're running or how things are performing or how much we're spending, anything like that. So I feel pretty confident with my team to be able to execute, which is nice. How did you find that operations person? That feels like it's such a hard challenge for young businesses to be able to find that integrator that works well with your vision and kind of understands your vision and the roles within the organization.
Yep, I agree. It's so hard too. I talk to so many folks and they want to know, how do I hire an integrator, right? And I think people, when they want to hire an integrator, they don't say it out loud, but what they really mean is, I want to hire someone to run my business while I sit on the beach. And that's not really what an integrator is. An integrator still needs the visionary, and the visionary job is not an absentee job. It's not a job that's done from the beach. You still have to be involved in the business. You have to lead the business. You have to be the leader who people look up to, because nobody likes to work when the guy they work for is on the golf course or on the beach, right? Literally or metaphorically. So I think you got to find, as it sounds like, I know you've done, is say, what am I good at? What are they good at? And you kind of have this yin and yang. And I think that's when it works really well. You can't really be absentee, but the integrator takes over the parts of the business that are their water and not yours.
Yeah. So, was this just posting jobs out there, or did you network with people, or was it a promotion from within? Where do you build that kind of trust?
So I hired him originally as director of finance and operations. The original role I posted was director of operations. Kind of my thought was I'll hire somebody and then promote them to COO later. And he saw my job application and had a little bit more of a finance background, but pitched me. He said, look, you should retitle this director of finance and operations, and you should hire me for the job. And here's why. So he stood out in that way. And then I interviewed him like I would almost, it sounds weird to say, almost like we were dating, because I knew we were going to get married. Like if this works, I want to work with this guy for 10 plus years. So we did formal in-office interviews. We, went out for drinks. Our spouses connected. I really got a sense for, who this guy is business-wise, but also, how does he think about the world? How does he solve problems? I asked him kind of, what do you think is the future of e-commerce? I asked him what books he'd read recently. I really tried to get a sense for the type of personality that he was. And the better I got to know him, we just clicked on every level. And he was good at the things I was weak at. And so I ended up hiring him as director of finance and ops. And after 3 years in that role, after proving himself, I promoted him to COO. And that's the other thing too. It's important to note, when I hired him, it's not like I hired him and all my problems were gone. Like people are like, oh, I'll go hire an integrator and, I'll hire somebody great. And in a month or two, all my problems will be over. And I always say this about anybody I hire, but especially more senior people, is almost everybody is useless for the first 3 months. There's just so much to learn about any new organization. So I brought him in and I spent 3 years, pouring into him, and training him on everything about our business, training him on, so he understood all the marketing and sales parts, even though they didn't roll up to him, training him on all the ops parts, how it worked, what the industry forces were, why we had made certain decisions. And, he gradually came up the curve, and now he's an absolute animal. He's incredible. He's my other half. But it took, 3+ years of working together for that. So it's really a long-term investment.
Absolutely. I have a bunch of questions I kind of want to follow up on. You mentioned that you gave equity. I assume that was after a number of years, or maybe when he moved into that COO role.
We use what's called a vesting schedule. So I granted him the equity up front, but then the equity vests over 5 years. So to give you an example, if he had X number of shares and left after 1 year, he would forfeit 4/5 of the shares because of a 5-year vesting schedule. So he's now been with me for a little over 3 years. So he's 3/5 vested. So if he sticks around for the full 5 years, then he'll have all of the equity. This is a great way, instead of just having to make future promises to people, you can say, I'll put it in black and white. Here's your schedule. As long as it works out, this is where you'll be. It's also a nice way to incentivize them to stick around. So that's what we did.
Cool. So that was on hire, wasn't on moving into the COO role then?
Correct. And then I gave him a little bump on moving into the COO role.
Did you tell him when you hired him that, here's your growth pathway? Or was it more of like, rock this role and then we'll see what kind of opportunities from there?
Yeah, I said this is a 3-year interview for COO.
Okay. So he kind of knew that coming in.
Yep. He wanted that too. He asked a lot of very good questions about growth. And, as I said, he had pitched me on the scope of the role. And then I said, this is a 3-year interview for COO. And even at one point, he came to me and he said, does it make sense for me to be COO or does it make sense for me to be CFO? So we talked a lot about the role of the COO versus the role of the CFO, what his strengths and weaknesses are. And, we kind of collectively decided that he would be best in the COO chair, but it was very collaborative.
Now, I want to go back to the start period. Is this business, was it entirely you or did you have any partners along the way?
So it was entirely me. So I actually, not many people know this, but way back, I did start the business with a partner. And our relationship is still great to this day. He actually came to my wedding, but I bought him out about a year after we started. He decided to go to law school and get his MBA and kind of wasn't really committed to the business. I bought him out for $8,000 way back when. Technically, I did have a co-founder, but it really wasn't Elements Brands then. So it's been just me kind of the whole way. I raised some money along the way in a couple different spots, but as far as kind of founders, it's just me.
Yes, I kind of wanted to breach on that a little bit. First of all, it gets super lonely. I get super lonely and I've got 2 business partners. I can't imagine how lonely it got when you were the sole founder after you bought out your partner. I would imagine there were many days where you just felt like you had no one you could talk with. Or am I off base here?
Yeah, absolutely. I know all founders listening to this have probably felt that way. And for me, the thing that got me through it was the e-commerce fuel community. And there are other communities out there too, but I got really involved with this one. And Eric, that's how we met way back when. But just having a group of other entrepreneurs to talk to and bounce ideas off of has been critical. People who get it, because it is lonely at the top. So I wouldn't have made it without other entrepreneurs to commiserate with.
Yeah. The other thing you talked about is you raised money. Talk about that strategy, going after raising money and kind of what the long-term vision for Elements Brands is.
Yeah. So in 2016, I'd done a couple acquisitions. So we had, I think, 3 brands at the time. And the business was working. It was profitable. It was growing. I owned the whole thing. And I remember being on a hike with my then girlfriend, now wife, and talking about and saying, I want to be bigger. I want to go bigger. I want to do more deals. I want to build a big company. I just feel like I'm meant for something more because I said at the time, I've won the game. I own 100% of a profitable, cash flowing, kind of 4-hour work week style e-commerce business. And I'm on this hike with you right now, midweek, and the business is making money. I've won the game. Why would I want to raise money and screw it all up? Essentially, right? Because when you raise money, you sign up for something different. You sign up to be a lot bigger. You sign up to really scale. But for me, ultimately, it just came down to, I just had the itch. I felt like I couldn't retire, at 30, which is how old I was at the time. I really felt like we had something that could scale and I wanted to raise money. So at that point, I kind of went out and I started talking to some people, really articulated our thesis of, we have 2 or 3 brands now. If we raise some money, we can have 5, 10, 20 brands, and this was in 2016. I was talking about, how Amazon was going to scale, how Shopify and how e-commerce was taking over the world. So it's the stuff that seems obvious now as we record here in 2020 on the back end of COVID was something I had to get investors comfortable with. But ultimately, I was able to raise about $3 million from some family offices, and they have just been phenomenal sounding boards. So these guys joined my board. We have quarterly board meetings where I prepare kind of 50 plus slides. We present the financials of the business. We review acquisition opportunities, strategy initiatives. And, I said I wouldn't be here without the e-commerce fuel community, and I wouldn't be here without these guys either, the expertise that they brought. So, for me, raising the money ended up to be so much more than just the money, bringing some experienced company builders onto the team, onto the board who have really been able to guide me. It's been great.
Yeah, I think for me, the advice out there for anyone raising money, it's look beyond the money. The money isn't what you really need. It's the people giving you the money and how that relationship's going to look. Because for anyone who's got a positive experience like you have, Bill, there's someone who has a negative experience. And I suspect a lot of the negative you get from VCs and from capital raises is because they're just aligning with the wrong people. They're just going after the money and they don't understand the strings that are attached to it. Good or bad,
Yes. And a lot of times, you're exactly right. And when people say they don't understand the strings that are attached to it, I think you don't mean necessarily contractual or financial strings. It's really more about expectations. And you said a great word, misaligned. When you raise capital, the people that invest in your business are going to have a certain set of expectations about not only where the business goes and how it grows, but also how you run the business. When you bring on external capital, it's no longer just about you. Like you can't just disappear on Tuesday and Wednesday to go fishing. They expect you to hire good executives. They expect you to report your financials in a standardized way. They expect you to be CEO and lead a growth company. What I've seen a lot when people raise money, the investors have different expectations for how they will run the business and where the business is going. And they don't even sometimes talk about those things up front. And then you get into a place where you're married to somebody, through a capital raise, and you both want very different things. And divorce is very difficult.
Yeah. So do all that stuff up front. Take your time. And I think, you are in a great position where your company is profitable. You own all of it. There's not that rush. You're able to pick and choose what those partnerships are. So as much as possible, be profitable.
That always helps.
It's just like you take the drama out of building businesses. And I know it's easier to say than do, but I think it's something that it's almost like, I don't know, there's things that you want to do with a clear head. And a clear head means, profitability and no drama and no other outside strings pulling you. You also mentioned earlier that you let go of 3 of your brands. Talk about the decision-making process to why these brands were no longer scalable, or maybe they were scalable, they just didn't fit your business model. But talk about that decision-making process, and then how do you go about evaluating it, selling it, getting it out, and kind of moving on?
Yeah. So this was actually a really difficult decision for us because kind of one of our core theses is that we don't want to sell brands. We don't buy brands with the intent to sell them ever. We buy a brand, we want to own it for the next 10, 20 years, right? But as we had grown, like any company, you pivot and you change strategy along the way. And when we were smaller, we had bought a couple brands that didn't necessarily fit our continued thesis anymore. They were also significantly smaller than, what we focus on now. So we looked at our portfolio and said we own 8 brands and 3 of them are 6% of revenue in aggregate. And if you've run an e-commerce business, you probably know that it's about the same amount of work to send an email to 100 people or 100,000 people. A lot of the work in running an e-com business really does scale. So we did kind of a time study on our employees and realized that they were spending about the same amount of time on the brands that were single-digit percentages of revenue as they were spending on the big brands. And we said, this is just not a good use of our time. And when we allocated all the overhead, those brands were not kind of as profitable as they should have been. So we said, why don't we sell these brands to entrepreneurs who can spend full time on them? Because they were so small for us, we kind of deprioritized them as well. And so we said, why don't we sell these brands to people who can really love them? Again, the way we did, when we were smaller. So that's kind of how we circled these 3 brands to sell, including the first brand that we had bought that I really love, was very sentimental for me, Nurture My Body. And we sold it to an entrepreneur now who has a lot of energy around it, and I'm excited for him. And so we reached out to our network and then also hired a broker as well to kind of help us take these businesses to market, and sold them kind of one by one over the course of 2020.
When you have all these brands tied into like a holding company and you have shared resources going towards a business, how do you properly identify what its profitability is, as well as the valuation that's fair on the marketplace?
So we use a metric called contribution margin. This is just like one of my soapboxes that I tend to get on, so I'll keep it succinct for this podcast. But contribution margin will transform your business if you're running an e-com business. You may have heard contribution margin referred to as variable profit before, but it is essentially how much money do you make on each incremental order. You take your revenue minus your cost of goods, and then you take out all of the variable costs that it costs you to get and ship and fulfill that order. So that would be all your Facebook ads, all your Amazon fees, the cardboard and tape that you wrap the box in, the shipping cost, all that stuff. If you use a 3PL, your 3PL fees, right? So it's kind of the amount, the reason it's called contribution margin is it's the profit that contributes to covering your fixed expenses. Your fixed expenses being salaries, rent, etc. These are the costs, and your contribution margin, in theory, should remain relatively constant as you scale up, and you'll kind of prudently add fixed costs below it. But we valued our businesses because they were smaller on kind of contribution margin minus whatever overhead was specific for that brand. So we had to do some pro formas, how much warehouse space would this take up, and do like a pro forma for rent, things like that.
Did you get fair valuation? Was the market right to sell the businesses? Are you doing it like a valuation based on like 3x profitability?
3x profit, yeah. So the market was pretty good this year. I mean, I can't disclose here publicly, what we sold them for, but we sold them for market multiples. And, you can go on the websites of all the brokers to kind of understand where that is. You can go on bizbuysell.com, kind of see where that is. And yeah, I mean, multiples have increased by about 1x EBITDA over the past year, just kind of with the growth in e-commerce and a lot more people interested in the space. So yeah, it was a good time to sell, but it's also a good time to buy. I mean, I feel like businesses are pretty fairly priced right now.
Do you buy businesses the same way, or do you try to get a better deal when you buy and then try to buy low, sell high? Is that one of your strategies, or do you just keep it level, buying and selling?
Well, remember, our strategy is never to sell. So this kind of year was an anomaly. We really don't expect to be selling brands on an ongoing basis. So, buy low, sell high is definitely not how I would describe, what we're doing. The way we do well is by buying brands and growing them. We don't do well by, sharking a seller on the front end. You can make a few bucks that way, but that's not how you build a really big company. You need to find a good brand, pay a fair price for it that the seller will be happy with and will sell a good business to you, right? Because good businesses command good prices. So I would much rather buy a good business at a good price than, negotiate a rock bottom price on a marginal iffy business, right? Because a good business is much easier to grow. So what we really look for is good businesses. We want to pay a fair price for them and then grow them after we own them.
The last thing I wanted to talk about along the lines of growth is you said you got $1 million ad. Walk me through how you get $1 million ad. I want a bunch of those. So what's the secret? What's the formula?
So do I. I want lots of $1 million ads too. And there is not really a formula. You can't just kind of blank sheet of paper, write it down and go, boom, that's $1 million ad. Anybody that's done Facebook advertising knows that a lot of it is kind of trial and error, throwing stuff at the algorithm, seeing what resonates, doing a whole bunch of multivariate testing, figuring out which ad copy gets the lowest CPA, which images, which videos, et cetera. So we do a lot of work in-house, kind of what we call trying to make thumb-stopping ads, because if you picture yourself on Facebook or Instagram just kind of scrolling with your thumb, right? You need an ad that in the first 2 seconds stops your thumb and makes you go, what the hell is that? Or that's kind of interesting, right? And Eric, you guys do a great job of this, with your content, at Beer Brand is, something that immediately catches the eye of the target audience and makes them stop and draws them in. So in this case, the thumb-stopping frame was my wife 8-month pregnant in a sports bra. Like, whoa, like what? That is a huge belly, right? Like that'll thumb stop you scrolling through Facebook if you are also a pregnant woman who we targeted at, right? So what we try to do is thumb stopping content that speaks to the audience and then drives them to a landing page that continues the story. If you're going to have a certain model in the ad, you're going to want that model on the landing page too. If you're talking about beard oil in the ad, you don't want to drop them on the homepage for Beer Brand, right? You want to talk about a page that keeps talking about beard oil, that kind of continues the hook in the ad. So what we try to do is iterate on that as much as possible. And we'll probably come up with a handful a year of these ads that can really scale, to a couple $1 million. but you can't do it formulaically.
So every ad you're putting up on Facebook, you've got a linked landing page, essentially.
Yes, I can't say we always do that, but if we're doing it well, we always do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think, maybe that's the secret that a lot of people aren't doing, or at least I don't know if we're doing it really well, is we kind of just driving to product pages, but being able to further tell that story. So think of your ad as, just the beginning of your ad strategy is going to be posting it to Facebook. That's just 50% of it. And then you have that other 50%. Are you driving sales on that landing page, or is it like email collection and then you drive them further down? Or how top of funnel is that ad?
Always for conversion. We're always advertising for conversion. And I mean, you're right. Sometimes we do drive traffic to the PDP, the product page. But what you'll realize is your product page is a landing page. And if you're driving a lot of traffic to your product page, we've looked at some of our kind of the traffic pie chart for our product pages and realized that like 60% of the traffic to that page is coming from the ad. Well, guess what? That means you should tweak the product page to resemble the ad because A, most of the people that are coming to the page saw the ad already. And B, that means the content in the ad is compelling. So put it on your PDP. So you don't necessarily have to do all of the work to make dedicated landing pages every time, but you can use your Facebook advertising. If something resonating on the Facebook ad, it will probably resonate with the same audience that's coming to that PDP. So you can iterate, if you don't want to go through all the pain in the butt of making new landing pages for every ad, you can at least iterate on your PDP based on what ads are running. And nobody ever does that. Like everybody's like, oh, this is the PDP. It's totally static. And just, I hope when people get here, they like it. Well, you could iterate your PDP based on what you're running on Facebook or what your Facebook ads are telling you your audience is into.
And then just some details. What kind of, last click attribution are you looking at? Is it a 7-day window, 30-day window, 1-day window?
We do 7-day on Facebook.
Okay. And you're looking for like a 2x return on ad spend, or are you able to get higher than that?
In some cases, we get higher. In some cases, we'll go a little lower. For all of our brands, we do what we call contribution margin ROAS. And this is like another huge trap Facebook advertisers fall into is Facebook makes that number ROAS, return on ad spend, like really easy to get in the ads manager interface. But that number is a trap because that number is based on revenue. And so if you're getting a 1x ROAS, it makes it feel like you're breaking even, but you're not. You didn't make revenues, not profit, right? Contribution margin is your marginal profit, right? Because you still got to make the product, put it in a box, ship it to them, et cetera. So that ROAS number in Facebook is a trap. Your actual cash on cash return on ad spend is far lower than the displayed Facebook ROAS. So what we do is we've done the work to figure out what our contribution margin rate is for each brand. And then we have what we call break-even ROAS, which, it might be 1.6 for another brand, might be 2.1 for another brand, where we know like we actually broke even on that sale after we made the product, shipped it, et cetera. And those are our target ROASs.
Nice, man. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you? Where can they sell you their business or buy your products?
Yeah. So Elements Brands, both plural, .com is our website. If you'd like to sell your business to us or you'd like to discuss what that would look like, we're glad just to talk, even if you're not sure you want to sell right now. If you want to talk about what your business might be worth or, how buyers would look at it, please reach out to us on elementsbrands.com. That form goes to me and also our head of acquisitions. So please fill that out. If you want to connect with me personally, I'm on Twitter at BillDA, or my personal website is BillDA.com.
Sweet, man. It was so great catching up with you. Learning a lot. I got a lot of notes I got to start implementing, man. And looking forward to one day when we'll finally be able to meet up again at ECF Live, hopefully, if it happens.
I hope so too. Looking forward to 2021. Thanks for having me on, man.
All right, guys, this has been another e-commerce conversations. Hope you guys were able to pick up a nugget or two, just like I did. Thanks for listening. Cheers. Keep on growing.